Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Ala Adams. I serve as an associate professor of healthcare administration and MHA program director at Park University, and I also serve as a member on the student engagement committee of the ACHE Southeast Texas chapter. This event is organized by this committee, and I would like to thank the two co-chairs, Dr. Harold Griffin, Brazosport College, and Marisa Luera, the MHA and MBA candidate at the University of Houston Clear Lake, for all the efforts in organizing a two-session panel discussion about the administrative fellowship in healthcare administration. So our agenda for today will include just a discussion about the fellowship process from the very beginning, how to identify a fellowship opportunity, how to apply for it, how to go through the interview process, what's important, how to prepare for it. If accepted, then how to do to join the organization, what to expect. So not to be surprised. And as you know, this is a fellowship is a temporary one-year appointment. So there is no guarantee that there will be a permanent opportunity, but how the fellows go about thinking how to transition to a permanent opportunity. So I think it will be exciting discussion. And we are delighted to have our esteemed fellows. And I would like to thank you all for dedicating some of your precious time and sharing about your experience. Let's see. So first, I need to thank the chapter strategic partners for their support for this program and other educational opportunities provided by our chapter. And our chapter member sponsors, the Texas Children's Hospital, Houston Methodist, St. Luke Health, Memorial Hermann Health System, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and HCA Houston Healthcare, and our diamond sponsors, UTMB Health and the Intercontinental Houston Medical Center, our platinum sponsors, Harris Health, Kindred Healthcare, Legacy Community Health, Page, Realty Trust Group, Rally Company, Texas A&M University, Texas Women's University, University of Houston Clear Lake, and Village MD, and as well as our silver sponsors, Berkeley Research Group, Brazosport College, Candeo Partners, and the University of Texas School of Public Health. And I would like to make just a few also announcements. If you are free tomorrow morning, please join us at the Common Bond at the Medical Center for some early morning networking at 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 to 8:30 a.m. And then as a reminder that part 2 of this session will be next week on Tuesday, June the 27th. It will be a panel of 3 more administrative fellows. And we are also excited about hearing about their tips and tricks how to succeed in administrative fellowship. Also save the date for an upcoming diversity, equity, and inclusion discussion on Wednesday, August 23rd. And that will be held at the Texas Women's University in the Medical Center. And also save the date now for our annual Healthcare Leadership Conference, a 2-day exciting event on November 2nd and 3rd. And now I would like to introduce our panelists. We are delighted to have you. And first is Sierra Sanchez. Sierra just completed the interview process and was just offered and accepted an administrative fellowship at the Texas Children's Hospital. So she's got the most up-to-date information, the most recent information, how to go about the application and interview process. Sarah completed her Master of Healthcare Administration from Texas A&M University in May 2023, and congratulations with graduation. We also have with us Athena Lee. She's an administrative fellow at Kelsey-Seybold Clinic. Athena earned her Master of Public Health degree in Healthcare Management from the University of Texas Health Science Center School of Public Health. And actually, in fact, Athena just completed her administrative fellowship at Kelsey-Seybold Clinic from June 2022 to May 2023, and already transitioned to a permanent role as a project manager for virtual care at Kelsey-Seybold. So it will be especially interesting to hear from Athena how she accomplished that. I'm curious, so being a fellow, at what point did you start thinking about a permanent position? Did you start talking with your preceptor, or how did it go, and how did you identify the area that was interesting to you? We also have with us Louise Goldberg. Louise is an administrative fellow at MD Anderson Cancer Center. Louise started her career as a clinical dietitian. Then she also worked as clinical manager for 2 departments at Memorial Hermann System, and then went back to school and earned her MBA from the University of Houston. Graduated in 2022. And since that time is serving as an administrative fellow at MD Anderson Cancer Center.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Louise. And we also have with us Corey Thompson. She's with us, but not on video yet. She is getting there. But I will go ahead and introduce. She is an administrative fellow at Baylor College of Medicine. She completed her MHA from the University of Iowa, relocated to Houston. And she is especially interested in healthcare in global health and in non-profit settings.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I look forward to speaking with you.
Thank you, Corey. You're not on video yet, right? Okay.
Yes, I'm 2 minutes away. Traffic is not nice today.
All right. Okay. 2 minutes. That's good. Okay. Well, let's begin in our discussion. And of course, we will begin first and talk about how to search for a administrative fellowship opportunity that is right for you, that looks appealing, that the institution looks interesting, what's helpful in that process, how to apply, how to go with the interview process. Louise, and I would like to kick things off with you. Would you please share, if you kind of go back in time when you graduated and thought about opportunities, and then you secured a fellowship opportunity, how important you believe that was for your beginning of the career in the healthcare administration and moving forward?
Yeah, thank you for the question. For me, I viewed it as an essential extension of my graduate studies. I even though I had management experience before, it was very specific to the departments that I was managing. And, you know, and I had never gotten an opportunity to really see such high level operations and the exposure that the fellowship offers to those types of conversations and meetings. You know, was something that I felt was very, very valuable as I sort of look much farther down the line for where I want to go with my career.
Thank you, Louise. And the same personal question to each panelist. Athena, if we could continue with you. If you go back in time and think about when you graduated and just thought about this step, and so then you got into the fellowship, how important was it?
For me personally, so the program I was in, administrative fellowships, wasn't necessarily top of the mind. So I kind of learned about administrative fellowships during my time, like doing internships in our hospital systems here in Houston. So as I started to learn more and more about it, I realized, you know, this is a really pivotal step into changing your career trajectory because as you know, the fellowship is basically a fast track and it gives you the opportunity to learn at an accelerated rate and participate in things you wouldn't be able to do in a traditional role. So for me, as I was nearing towards graduation, I realized like an administrative fellowship is the best way to really grow and learn at a fast pace, but also experiencing new things and departments.
Thank you, Athena. Sierra, and I would like to hear your take on this question.
Yeah, thank you. So for me personally, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a fellowship last summer when I started applying. And I think once I started doing research and kind of what Athena and Luis already said, I started realizing how great of an opportunity it would be to do a fellowship and get that chance to work with high-level leaders and just grow and find where my passion is moving out throughout the hospital. And so I'm really excited for how my journey as a fellow is going to turn out and starting this program. I'm starting in a few weeks, and I think it's really going to be beneficial just finding out what I'm most passionate about and getting to work with amazing leadership.
Thank you, Sierra. I actually want to continue with you since you just most recently went through this process. So can you describe your fellowship research process? What resources were particularly helpful in finding a potential program?
So some of the biggest resources for me were, first of all, my program was amazing. They were sending emails actively for fellowship. So I definitely think most programs do that, and to just keep in touch with all those emails, starring them, saving them, and going back and using all the links for administrative fellowships. So keeping in touch with your school the summer before. I also thought it was really important using ACHE, the national website. They have a huge list of fellowships nationally. So I was able to look into that and find out current fellowships and all the deadlines for them. Another way of researching is honestly the most basic way, but I just Googled Texas administrative fellowships, and it actually works pretty well. It pops up with almost every hospital in Texas that is offering an administrative fellowship, and it sends you straight to the link where it has every requirement for applying, and then also has all the deadlines as well. And then I also did look into NAFCAS. I personally didn't apply through NAFCAS, but they also have an extensive list of fellowships to look through. Another important thing I noted is that I personally was looking into pediatric hospitals. And so with my research, I was looking at places I wanted to live potentially. So I was looking at locations and hospitals I was interested in. So I think that's another important factor when researching is obviously the location of the hospital and if you're willing to move there.
Thank you, Sierra. Very interesting. Luis, I wanted to ask you next question. So also, if you go back in time, so you remember you were thinking about also researching for the opportunities and kind of, you knew that's a competitive process, right? Highly competitive. So what did you do to prepare for this opportunity and give yourself competitive advantage? And also a second part of this question, and today when you're already kind of in the journey of the fellowship, if you kind of going back and thinking about advice for students, in hindsight, what might you have done differently in preparing for the fellowship as well?
Sure, yeah. You know, I had great advice from former fellows. I had a summer internship at Texas Children's actually in strategic business operations, and they had connected us kindly with one or two former fellows that were now employed, and they gave some great advice, one of which was join ACHE as a student member and utilize the directory, and reach out to local contacts or someone that perhaps might be at an institution that you are interested in applying for, and see if they'll be willing to either chat with you, hop on a Zoom, which is so convenient now, or be willing to exchange emails, to kind of say, what is, what, in your opinion, what is your organization looking for? Is there any advice you can give for standing out? And sometimes they'll come right out and tell you, MD Anderson, for example, if you don't mention anything about cancer, and that being a drive, you're probably not going to be considered. So little tips like that you may not have considered. And that was a great resource using, current fellows are super busy, so they may not always respond, but former fellows, absolutely. And the ACHE directory was a great resource for me, for sure. I don't know that I would have prepared any differently. I worked really hard and I was very organized, and I, kept a calendar of like when things were due, and making sure to stay on top of like my recommendation, the people writing recommendations. So I feel like I did one thing right. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing great advice. Athena, would you like to add something?
Yes, of course. So I agree completely with Luis on what to do for like a competitive advantage. I think one thing that's also useful to have is if you have been involved in projects in the past, maybe, knowing what's in your project portfolio or being at least able to talk about it during the interview process. A lot of the interviewers like to hear about things you may have done at other organizations and, the processes you went through, people you worked with. So that's something I would also add is if have a project portfolio ready or at least know what you've done. I think one thing I would say if I could go back in the fellowship process is starting the personal statement early. I tend to see, and I've experienced this with myself, is the personal statement is the hardest part of the application. It's very hard to talk about yourself in a short period of time, and you're trying to give these organizations a quick perspective about your life. So my recommendation is always start the personal statement early and always have other people reading it, giving you guidance on maybe how to shape and frame it, because this is the first look that an organization gets at you. This is how they learn about you, your personality, maybe even your work style and management style as well. So that's my one piece of advice is start the personal statement early and just be able to talk about what you've been able to do.
Thank you, Athena. The next question is I understand maybe it's just your perception. Everyone is thinking when applying for something, well, what is that organization is looking for? So I understand when posing this question to you, you really did not know when you were applying what the organization is looking for in the candidates, but still, I would like to ask about your perception since you went through the interview, you heard the questions. So as you saw it as a candidate, your take, in your opinion, What do you think the healthcare organizations are looking for in the candidates for the fellows? Sierra, I would like to continue with you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question and definitely something to really think about when preparing for the application process. I think first off, and one of the most important things is that they're looking for someone that is eager to learn. I think the fellowship is, whether it's a year or 2 years, it's a whole learning process and being willing to take opportunities as they come. So I think that's a huge thing. And I think a way to show that is to express that you have goals and that you are self-aware that you're a fresh grad and you might not know everything, but you're willing to learn and you're willing to ask questions. And so I think that's really important. And I think they're looking for that in a candidate. And alongside with that self-awareness, I think knowing they're looking for candidates that know their strengths and weaknesses and know where to step up and when to ask for help. And so I think those are really important things going into the fellowship. And lastly, like I said, expressing that you have goals within the organization. Personally, when I was applying with Texas Children's, I expressed how I was really looking to work in the endocrinology department and that service line, and giving them something specific like that and expressing your desire to work something specifically is also really important as well.
So what I hear, it's more about your personality, that you are willing to learn. It was not about your technical skills, that you can use Excel or something. I did not hear you say that. So
yeah, I think that is obviously important. And I think our education background can speak for itself to an extent, but yeah, definitely know Excel and all that. But I do think it is important just to show that if you don't know something as well as you would like to, that you're willing to learn and ask for help.
Thank you. Corey, I would like to ask you the same question. So when you went through the interview process, what was your perception? What the organization was looking for in the candidates?
Well, so I can give you a more clear answer because we run our recruitment. And so for fellows at our institution, and I can honestly, hindsight is always 2020, so I can look back and say it was consistent across the organizations I interviewed with. We want someone who's true to themselves and is honest. So for example, if you in your personal statement say you're an outgoing person, very personable, and then in your interview you're the complete opposite, it's not very truthful. And honestly, it's not what we're looking for. We want, if you're more introverted and prefer to work alone, just say that. I think to what everyone has said and so far is very true. But I think especially for our fellowship, and honestly, any fellowship, you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone. I can say I have stepped out of my comfort zone so many times during my fellowship, just because you have to be willing to advocate for yourself. Do you have a personality that, you have no problem voicing, like, I don't think that this is right, or, I really want some experience here. Is there any possible way I can get that? Being able to advocate for your experience, for your fellowship, and being truthful to that in your interview is a huge thing, because I think organizations really appreciate that. You come in knowing what you're looking for and what you want, and are they willing to give it to you? Because you're also interviewing the organization as well. So keep that in mind.
Great answer. Thank you, Corey. Louise, as you see it, what else a candidate can do to stand out in the competitive application process?
Sure. I loved Corey's answer. I agree with everything. Yeah, so I think another way is making sure that you you find some connection to the organization that you are applying to. You know, and it is really important to not just make it some sort of generic, I just need a fellowship. You know, and I get that. You know, I had friends who blanketed a bunch of places, but the interviewers, the people who are reviewing your applications, which is typically other fellows in the first 1 or 2 stages, they're going to pick up on that. And so you really, as everyone's already said, be authentic, but you know, also find that connection. Maybe look up the mission and the vision for the organization, and really put that and something memorable into your personal essay about why joining this organization would be meaningful to you. And in some instances, you have to dig deep if it's your neighbor was affected by this or whatever it is, but find that connection and really highlight that in your personal essay.
Thank you, Louise. So what I hear is learn about the culture of this organization that you're going through the interview with. Okay. Athena, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think one thing I would add is that would give a participant like a competitive advantage would be knowing how to talk about your experiences, but how your past experiences can also be translated into what you will be doing for the organization as well. So I may have worked on a pharmaceutical project in the past, but how will I use those skills and experiences to kind of shape my project experience at the fellowship as well. So knowing how to translate what you've done before, but also what you have the capability of doing if you were to join the organization.
Thank you. All right, so one, identified opportunities, applied for different opportunities, and then received an invitation for the interview. So the next question is how to prepare for the interview. What maybe some specific advice how to go to prepare for that interview? Sierra, I would like to begin with you.
Well, I personally am kind of an over preparer, I would say. So I really like to kind of do mock interviews, I guess, whether it's with myself or with other people. So I would really recommend if you're at an internship right now or even doing research, whatever it is you're doing this summer, getting your preceptor or anyone that you're working with to run a few mock interviews with you. I think that's a great opportunity to really kind of shake the nerves out and have someone be able to give you critiques and suggestions on how to improve your interview skills. That was something I was able to do. I had a mock interview with actually my program director before you know, starting this process, and it really helped me just to have that his point of view and give me some examples of how I could better answer my questions. And then I also am a big like I would make a list of all possible interview questions, and then I would write out my answers for it and just kind of go over it. That's just my personal method of preparing for an interview. I also just think it's important to always, again, kind of take that deep breath, be confident in yourself, tell yourself, hey, like I can get this, I'm going to get this interview and I can get through it. And just go in with like a positive attitude for each interview, because it's normal. They know you're going to be a little nervous and a little stressed out, but just to try to get through those nerves and feel confident throughout each interview.
Thank you, Sierra. Corey, what your suggestion would be?
My mom actually gave me this advice. So before I even fully answer the question, I highly recommend that you document every question that you get asked. So when you go to the next interview for a different organization, you kind of have an idea of how fellowship questions are and what they're asking. I also spoke with past students that went through the process to understand what their experience was, and also asked if I should prep for any case questions. That's another piece of advice I encourage you all to do, is just be prepared that a majority of fellowships nowadays have case questions. Nothing too grueling, but just kind of have your ducks in a row. I think that the mock interviews are a great way to prepare yourself, but I think another way is to also know your resume from front to back, word, like not word for word, but you should know the experience that you had 5 years ago. If it's on your resume, it's up for a question. So just be prepared for that as well.
I'm wondering, this is a yes or no question. Was the first question during the interview, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, that's typically always, and your answer should not be more than 2.5 minutes. And always be cognizant of the time. If you have a 15-minute phone screen, do not take 5 to 7 minutes on telling me about yourself. It should be a quick little, here's a blurb.
Is that sort of like an elevator speech or not? What do you think?
Yes, you're selling yourself on, you know, your experience, who you are, because they have a list of questions they want to see how you answer. And if they don't get to them, then you're going up against 20 plus students who had the time to answer those questions. We now have no idea how you would have answered it.
Thank you. I think now, what's your suggestion? How to prepare for the interview?
Well, Sierra and Corey made really great points. I think one thing to remember during the interview process is it's a learning process. So they're learning about you, you're learning about them. So I mean, for me, I would say have some questions ready to go at the end of your interview, things you would want to learn about the organization, just to make sure that it's a good fit for both you and them. So that's my recommendation for preparing for the interview.
Can I add a quick
Sure.
her comment? I also don't recommend you ask the same question in every interview, because at least for us, we write down the questions just so we kind of remember, oh, they had this great insightful question. Just mix it up, because not everyone's going to have the same, you know, feel for your questions. So.
Right. Louise, would you like to add something?
These guys covered it. They did a great job. I think the only thing I would say is thinking past that first interview or that first phone screen, you know, and when you get deeper into the next level and the next level of interviews, you know, it becomes with higher level people in the organization. And I think it's really important, you know, if you make it to the round where you're interviewing one-on-one with executives, or however it works at other facilities. I know, like I was interviewing at Texas Children's, and I was interviewing at MD Anderson, and you need to know who you're interviewing with, and you need to be able to ask unique questions to them. Like if you're interviewing with whoever's on the interview panel, let's say it's the VP of Supply Chain Management, have a valid question and a meaningful question for that person. So thinking past like initial beginning stages, beginning interviews, if you make it to the next levels, you know, your questions really need to be tailored to show your research and your interest in that specific organization. Even if you get the opportunity to do that like 3 or 4 times with other organizations, let them think that they are the only ones because of the uniqueness of your questions and interest that you're showing.
I love this suggestion. I think this is wonderful. All right, let's switch our gears and talk about the fellowship itself. Corey, next question to you. Thinking about your first 2 months, can you describe the onboarding process, the role of the fellow? Was it something that you expected? Was there something that surprised you? How did the first 60 days go?
The first 60 days of our fellowship, we are told that our sole job is to run recruitment. Maybe less than 60 days, because we have to change. There's a lot of things you have to go and change. Update the website, run your seminars, start prepping packets. Like, there is so much you have to do. That is your job. The preceptors look to you to have that under control. I know that's similar for Texas Children's. My friend is a fellow there, and she had kind of the same experience. So I'd say that's kind of a similarity across fellowships, because who else is supposed to run the fellowship unless you have someone who's designated specifically for the fellowship, and the fellows just get to go do project work. I think after that, and you could we're allowed to take projects, but we couldn't overwhelm ourselves with 7 different projects while we're also running the entire recruitment process. You want to be sure that you're giving your full best effort in those projects. So I'd probably say I had about 3 projects, and then everything else was recruitment.
Thank you, Corey. Athena, the same question to you. If you think about your first 2 months, how did it go, and what your suggestion would be to the students who just maybe thinking about this opportunity and maybe will get this opportunity? Is there something that maybe they should be doing to prepare for the start?
Well, I would say for Kelsey Sewell Clinic, we are structured a little bit differently than the traditional hospital systems. So for us, onboarding looks a little bit different than Corey might have mentioned. So our first week, we actually do EPIC training. So this is just to actually get us familiar with the EHR EMR system, because part of our role through our fellowship is to learn what it means to be a clinic administrator, a project manager. We have different kinds of rotations where we do not only project rotations, but departmental and clinic rotations as well. So during our first 2 months, it's basically a rapid immersion on the departments that are at Kelsey, whether they be on the healthcare service line side or the ambulatory side. So for my program specifically, we have 3 fellows total, but we could all be doing different things. Like, we could be at different departments, different clinics at a time. But for us, we're not only just doing rotations, we're also doing recruitment as well. So it really gives us the opportunity to see like how our time management is as well. For us, projects come a little bit later on in the fellowship, or maybe around like the end of the 2nd month. But for us, it is a little bit different with how we do our onboarding of our fellowship, because within the first week after EPIC training, you're already sitting in leadership meetings with your C-suite, with your executives. You're learning the management styles of the different regional directors and seeing how operations are being run, not only on the clinic side, but the operations side as well. I think my piece of advice, something that I had to learn in my fellowship specifically, was learning to be flexible and adaptable. Some of these department rotations or clinic rotations, they can be a little bit uncomfortable just because they're new. But I think it's important to have an open mind going into the process and realizing, okay, this is just to give me a perspective on like our organizational structure and how we run operations. It may be a little bit overwhelming at first, but it's just really a part of the learning process. And you'll definitely become more comfortable as you meet more people. You develop your relationships with leadership and the physicians as well.
That's a great point. Thank you, Athena. Louise, I want to ask you, did you find personally that you maybe liked some areas more than others? For example, strategy or operations management or revenue cycle or some other setting. Did you like some areas personally better, and why?
Sure, yeah. Because of my background, I found myself navigating to clinical operations. I felt really comfortable in that space, but we were forced to, in a good way, to really find a well-balanced of a balanced portfolio of projects to take on. Even though we had choices within, they might say, well, you have to take on a strategy project and you have to take on a finance project. And so it really allowed me exposure to areas that, I was really surprised to find that, in my school world, in my academic world, I had great distaste for like things like finance. But when applying it in the real world setting, to like clinical operations, finance was really exciting. On the flip side of that, I thought I really enjoyed strategic operations but as I got involved in a project with our strategy from an institutional perspective, I found that, for me, even though it's extremely important, for the navigation of the organization, the pace of it, because you're so dependent on so many different stakeholders, and coming from a clinical background and a clinical background in TMC, I found, oh, wow, this is not the pace that I want to function at. And even though I have great respect for it and I enjoyed participating on that project, I realized this is not the space for me. So it was sort of both sides to the coin there.
Thank you. This is very insightful. Thank you very much. Corey, did you find some areas more appealing to you? Some areas that you liked better than others?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Louise brings up a very, very valid point. There are pros and cons to anywhere you go. I will say I went in thinking I was really going to love strategy. For me personally, strategy, I spent some time in our strategy department and it wasn't for me. Rev cycle, again, not for me, but kudos to the people that love it. Clinical operations, I also took my fellowship, and because we're in an academic institution, if you are interested in that, again, step out of your comfort zone and go to places that you don't think you ever want to spend time in. I don't like research and I don't care for education, but I went there to really confirm, do I really not like these two missions of our institution? And I can confirm the projects that I had, they just were my cup of tea. I prefer clinical operations all the way. So I made sure I got experience in every way possible in anything I could, because a fellowship is great for project work, but it's also a wonderful opportunity to decide what you really don't like to do, because you're seeing, back to everyone's point, high level projects, you're sitting in high level meetings. And if you hear something, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to touch that. You now know, like, that is not for you.
That is interesting. Thank you, Corey. Athena, I wanted to ask you about your typical day as a fellow. So I'm just curious. So is your typical day something that you actually expected before the fellowship? If yes, so what was exactly what you expected? And if not, then what was it that was surprising?
So yeah, the answer to that question is yes and no. So before we go in, we do know what type of rotations we're doing. However, once you're in those rotations, it can be a variety of things. So for our clinic administrator rotations, which is basically like practice management, you could be working the front desk, dealing with patient complaints, working with clinical staff or providers, scheduling, templates, other issues that may arise. For department rotations, it can depend as well. You can see a whole lot of things. I will say one type of typical day that I know is very stable was when we did a strategy rotation. So we do about an 8-week strategy rotation, and we work on projects within that strategy rotation. But I will say, I think it's hard to say there's a typical day where, from 8 a.m. to 5 a.m., I know exactly what I'm doing, because healthcare is not necessarily like a recipe, like you can follow step by step. Sometimes things are going to pop up and you're going to need to learn how to firefight and work through those issues, whether it be on the provider side or the patient side as well, which I think was a good thing for me because it taught me how to be flexible and how to adapt fast and find solutions in a short amount of time. So while we might not have a typical day in the life of the fellow, I would say it's pretty consistent of the types of things you will learn within the rotations as you go through them. Hopefully that was not too confusing.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing. Luis, would you describe your typical day and what was sort of what you expected and what was new and interesting?
Sure. Yes. So, like Athena referred to, there are some consistent meetings once you get onto projects. There's weekly or alternating days that you are consistently in meetings. There are meetings with the CEO or the executive leadership team that are very consistent, that are related to their communication with one another. And for the sake of the institution, that consistency is really important. So there's meetings like that, but then there's others from larger scale, big events that you might be planning for, working on a team, like a service line retreat for, all of the faculty and APPs, and where they're sharing their research, and you work leading up to this big event, and then the big day happens, and the next day you sleep all day. Yeah, so it just sort of fluctuates, like any normal job. I think what is a bit unusual in this situation is that I found, because we are allowed to be included in so many things across so many different departments and divisions, what your schedule is like as an admin fellow is likely not anything like what it will be when you get into a permanent position. So like I might be in strategy meetings and have like 5 of those a week, and in addition to something for the service line, and when you pull into a permanent position, you're really more focused, and so your meetings will be related to that, and maybe you won't be spending as much time on that, on such a wide range of things. So I think that's probably just the big difference, but yeah, I think that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Louise. Corey, next question is for you. Can you talk a little bit about typical responsibilities of an administrative fellow? Assignments, what kind of projects the fellows work on in your institution?
So to Athena's point and Louise's point, you have meetings that you go to every day, or they're regular. For us, it is the fellow's responsibility to see, we have our physician group practice. We put together all of the committee presentations and we do the minutes. So that is a requirement, no ifs, ands, or buts. And then obviously over the course of, you asked me a question about what does the first 60 days look like? Along with the recruitment, I at least went ahead and I reached out to a majority of our administrators on the clinical side, some on the education side, just to learn about people's backgrounds, get to know them, build that relationship. So when it came time, I was able to tell my preceptor, I really connected with these people. I would like to see if they have any potential projects. And then we also have some mandatory rotations, one of them being revenue cycle. and one of them being strategy. So I think every fellowship is different, but for ours, at some point you kind of set the standard of what you're looking for and how much work you want to do. And as a fellow, your job is to be a workhorse, do a lot with very minimal resources. But I think as my time when I was a fellow, it changed from the beginning to the end. It looked very different. My projects changed immensely, just because I think people started to really understand what a fellow can do and what we're capable of doing.
Thank you. Athena, the same question to you. Could you talk a little bit about the fellow responsibilities, types of assignments and projects that the fellows are working on in your organization?
So within our organization, our fellowship is a branch of our operations management team. So a lot of the projects we work on are like based on operations, but from there that could branch out into different things, whether it be what's going on in our clinics. So we have about 35 clinics in the Houston area. So there's a lot of stuff going on, you know, from front desk registration, patient satisfaction. Also, we work with a lot with the healthcare service lines. So for me, I worked with the ambulatory surgery center for a month. So I did a project where we were linking two departments together, the pharmacy department and the ambulatory surgery department. And we were trying to do process improvement QI for them. So for our organization specifically, one of our main responsibilities is, you know, be present in our rotations and to actually assist with any tasks that may be needed, tasks or projects that may be needed.
Thank you. Louise, I'm wondering, so when you get assigned a project, what about some support? Is the support provided to you, or you're looking for something? Could you describe the support that you receive when executing projects?
Sure. And I can only speak to MD Anderson, obviously my experience. Our current CEO established the Leadership Institute, and it provides a wealth of curriculum on everything from finance to research funding and the specific types of fund group types. Anything you want to learn, there's probably either some sort of online course or a synchronous online course or in person. Now all of that is resuming. But I found even beyond that, when there were resources within the organization. When I was studying during school, I thought I need to know everything about everything. But the reality is that there are a lot of people who specialize in these areas. And I keep going back to finance, but I think of them as like my true partners and teammates. When I was presenting business plans, I would reach out to them, as a resource and say, here's what I'm looking to do. Here's what I'm looking to, this is the story I'm trying to tell. Can you help me with, the backing that up with the data? When I was doing a gap analysis to present to our chief patient quality officer, and as I was analyzing this data from a survey that I conducted, I was like, who can help me with this? And so there was someone who was special, like a data analyst, who was like, I am here for the sole purpose of helping researchers, and kind of tell this story or analyze these results in a way that's very meaningful. So I was really surprised. I think that those resources existed, and that we were all one big team, and so that was wonderful. And not to mention that all the executives, all the leadership team that you're working with, they want you to be successful. They're investing a lot of time training you. And so when you ask a question, you know, they want to be there to answer it for you or direct you to someone who can. So I found the support over this past year has just been tremendous. As long as you speak up and ask for help when you need it.
Thank you, Louise. Corey, what about you? Do you get the support that you need? Can you describe the support that you receive when executing projects?
Louise touched on the most important piece, which is you're in school and you think that you need to learn everything. For example, in case comps, they ask you to put a pro forma together and implementation plan. And it's like, oh my gosh, do I really need to know how to do all of this? And then you start your fellowship or your job and you realize you have a pro forma team. You have a data analytics team. I think one of the key pieces in being successful in your fellowship is knowing who the right people are to go to get what you're looking for. So if I am working on a presentation that needs to be very visually appealing and, you know, a little bit of data, but not too much to where I'm going to lose the folks, then I know exactly what person in the institution I'm going to go to. If I need help with a pro forma, I'm going to my pro forma team. Like, I think knowing who provides what specific support will be critical in your success. And I think the people you're rotating with, the departments you're rotating with, they should be helping you. But I will add this, not everyone is your friend. And not everyone is paid extra to help you succeed. There are people in this world, it is unfortunate, that are very focused towards their job and they see someone who's new in their career, wants to succeed, and they don't have the time. That's not necessarily wrong, but that is the reality. And so if you identify early on who those people are, then you will know early on who to go to for the correct support that you need. So in my fellowship, it was every section that I rotated with, every mission I rotated with, I had support where I needed it. And I also had resources I knew where to go to get, you know, the answers to the questions I had, and the data that I was looking for, and things like that.
What I hear is a lot of the people skills. You kind of need to be
to build
able to work
relationships
with people. Or
Yeah.
exactly, interesting. Athena, I have a question for you. What skills do you believe are the most essential for success of a fellow?
So, like I mentioned before, being adaptable and flexible. Healthcare is ever changing, so you should be able to, you know, adjust. I mean, also being open to learning as well. Not everything you do is going to be your favorite, but you're going to get a valuable lesson and experience out of it. I think to be a successful fellow is to be open to the process. I think that's just the most important thing to keep in mind while going through it. There are going to be times where you feel frustrated or disappointed in the way things play out, but it's natural. It's going to happen.
Thank you. Louise, what's your take on that? What skills do you believe are the most essential to the success of a fellow?
I fully agree with Athena. I think that eagerness to learn and coming in with a level of humility. You know, I entered the fellowship, probably the oldest fellowship in the history of the world, with 24 years of healthcare experience behind me. You know, but I approached it as I have something to learn from every single person here, whether they've been working for 1 year or whether they're, you know, the head of the company. You know, and I think just having that love of learning, have that be an extension of your graduate studies. You know, but I think Corey had mentioned it earlier also, about being okay with being uncomfortable. You know, there were many times where, and, you know, just kind of like carpe diem, seize that moment when you have the opportunity, because when you're in a fellowship role, everyone's expecting you to learn and grow and develop. And so take that opportunity, take the whole year, however long your fellowship is, to take advantage of that. There were times in meetings where maybe like our clinical administrative director wasn't able to make a meeting where she was supposed to be reporting out. And they said, well, I guess we'll skip it. And I said, oh, I'm happy to do it. I was like, oh my gosh, I probably was beet red in the face, but I did it. And they didn't remember the metrics that I said that month, but they remembered that I was willing to do that, and do whatever was needed. So just kind of take those things and go forward, and you'll be very successful.
Wonderful insight. Thank you, Louise. Corey, next question for you. What do you perceive to be the pros and cons associated with fellowships?
Pros, it gives you if you're going in with little to no project work, I think a fellowship is a great route. I think a fellowship is also a great route if you aren't fully sure on where you fit in best. So again, kind of how I said earlier, strategy, I was like, oh yes. But I got into strategy, I was like, no. Clinical operations has definitely has my heart. It's great. For those of you who are interested. But I think a couple cons are, we have this perception, and it's not wrong. It is sort of the truth, and it used to be the truth of it is a fast track to an executive level position. But it depends on the organization you choose to do your fellowship at. So when you go and you look at past fellows, where they are now, are they in management positions? Are they in director level positions? Are they even at the institution still? If they're not, what role are they in now? That's a huge thing to look into. So for example, HCA, that is truly a fast track executive program. There was a couple others that prioritize putting fellows, SCA, surgical care affiliates, they prioritize putting you in a director level position, assistant director, post fellowship. So I think when fellows go in and they don't get a high level manager position or director position, they can kind of be discouraged. And I don't think that you should, I won't tell you how you should feel, but don't feel that way. It all has to do with where you choose to do your fellowship. And also a pro is doing your fellowship there. It's not a guarantee to a job, but you're most likely going to get a job, because if you do a good job during your fellowship, they want to keep you there. They want your work ethic. They want your personality. So.
Interesting. Athena, what your response would be? How do you perceive, what are the pros and cons of fellowships?
I think one of the pros of a fellowship is you get a really well-rounded experience throughout the organization. So you get to see a lot of different departments that you may not see if you were, working as an entry-level role. So basically you get to try everything that's available at your organization. I think one of the cons could be sometimes you feel like you may not have enough time at a certain department or rotation, but in the fellowship process, it's really open communication policy. So if you feel like you would like to spend more time, or if you want to try something that's not in your traditional rotation, that's an option to do. So I would say, I think a pro is you really get to develop relationships with the departments. The only way that healthcare organizations are really successful is if our departments are really interconnected and we just work well together. And I think the fellowship does a really good job of giving you those opportunities to connect and meet a lot of different people in your organization.
Thank you, Athena. And I would like also to continue with you, continue the same discussion about what you just mentioned. But also, do you believe that a fellowship prepares a person for a permanent position? If yes, in what way? If not, then why do you think that not really? So what do you think?
I think fellowships do prepare you for a permanent role within your organization at the end. I mean, this whole point of a fellowship is to train, to learn the organization, to be familiar with the practice, the operations, the different projects and initiatives going on. For me personally, I did a project in virtual care, and then part way through my fellowship, I realized, I think this is the track I want to go. So something that's a little bit different about my fellowship experience, and I can't say this happens at every organization, is they let me be the interim project manager for about 2 months during my fellowship, just to make sure it was a good fit before we do a full transition into me becoming the project manager as well. So I think one thing that was really important through this whole process was having that open communication about what you see yourself doing at the organization and how you see your career trajectory. Because we, during our fellowship, we see everything: practice management, operations, healthcare service lines, and, after experiencing all that, I realized early on, like, hey, I think this is a really good fit for me. I don't come from a virtual care background. This is something I learned throughout my fellowship. So I would say, for me personally, I think my fellowship really did help me prepare for a permanent role. I got to work with other project managers, with my directors and executives, to really help me have a seamless transition into this role.
Okay, and then about your personal experience. So I'm just curious how this transition happened. Did you voice it yourself that you found this area interesting? Or did you find out that there is an opening? How did that go, that you kind of began attaching yourself to this area?
So early on in my fellowship, I was assigned to a virtual care project where I had met the team. We had taken a little hiatus because I went to go do other rotations within the clinics, within our strategy department as well. As I was going through the executive leadership meetings, I was hearing about the department wanting to work on new initiatives, but they didn't have the resources behind to work on it. I kind of volunteered myself and said, hey, I really like this department. I really like the team I worked on. We've done some cool stuff in the past. I would like to just continue and see, is this something I can grow into? And my executive sponsors, we have 2 senior VPs that I work with. They were like, yeah, like, go ahead, let's see how it rolls. And I mean, at first, I won't lie, like at the beginning of playing interim PM, it was a little bit rough. It was a little bit rough at the beginning, I won't lie. But as time, like as the months went on, it seemed to flow a lot better. We built those relationships before me transitioning into the role. So by the time I started in the role, I was already familiar with what virtual care services we're going for, what are our initiatives, what are our big projects, what is the organization expecting from this department as well. So I will say, I feel like this is something that's kind of hard to talk about, to, us being new grads. It's hard to voice what we want sometimes because we don't want to step on toes. We don't want to offend anyone. We don't want to make it seem like, oh, like we just don't want to do anything else. We just want to focus on this one thing. But I feel like if you're very open and honest about it, it won't be taken in that way.
Very good. Thank you very much for this insight. Louise, what is your take on this question? Do you believe that the fellowship prepares one for a permanent position? If yes, in what way? If not, then in what way also?
I think it can, yes. I think that it's going to depend on you as an individual, and sort of what are you getting exposure to? What are you jumping in and trying? So just like graduate school, you get out of it what you put in. So I think that you can, if you know what you want to do, like 10 years from now, 5 years from now, you know, and you gather those experiences while you can, I think that it'll set you on the path to that job. I do think that specifically in terms of getting a job right afterwards, yes, it definitely does. We've talked a lot today about building relationships and how important that is. And you certainly get access to leaders that you might not otherwise have for, you know, 5 or 10 years if you went through a more traditional path. So I think that in many ways, the fellowship definitely sets you on the path for success and where you want to be if you choose to take it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Louise. Corey, what is your take on this question?
I think if you are choosing to stay at that institution, it very much so prepares you. If you choose to go to another organization and you have that plan early on, then you need to make sure that you're getting experience that can be taken and put in somewhere else. So if you need heavy finance experience, go ahead and get yourself heavy finance experience, because that can translate pretty much anywhere. I will say for the job I'm in now, I got it based off of connections from my fellowship, but also knowing the internal processes of a lot of different things just based on the projects that I had. To Louise's point, your fellowship is what you make it. Even though you have rotations in, you know, some organizations are more structured than others. So if you have 2 to 3 months in this area, 2 to 3 months in this area, that's all fun and games, unless you are not willing to put in the work and step up and say, yes, I can take that project, even though your plate is full. They say not to, you know, overload yourself. It's 1 year of just like hard work, and it pays off always. You will always be brought up in conversation if you do a good job and you say yes. So that's kind of how I landed my position at my institution.
Thank you. I would really appreciate your thoughts also about that. Think about how what you learn can be useful in another organization as well, kind of building your background using this opportunity.
Yeah, I do want to add, I think when I went into my fellowship, I thought it was just this big bad thing that if someone left post-fellowship, you don't do that. I was told by so many people, no, that's if you choose to leave after your fellowship, by all means, go to the opportunity you feel is best for yourself. So I'll tell you this as just advice. If you realize that an organization is not the best fit for you and you're not potentially maybe the best fit for them, don't waste your time, don't waste their time, don't waste resources, and choose to go somewhere where you will fit in best. Because the worst thing that you can do is stay somewhere and you're not passionate about the work that you're doing, you're not passionate about the mission of the organization, and then, you know, you don't want to be looked at as some type of way. So I will say it's okay to leave post-fellowship if you really just don't feel that place is for you.
Thank you, Corey. And that leads us to the next question. Sierra, I would like to have you started on this. Can you share some of your thoughts about the importance of building one's brand and how to go about it?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And especially as a recent graduate, I think I'm still working to develop my brand and put action into it. And kind of advice for people applying for administrative fellowships, I think one way to define your brand is to look what sets you apart from other people. And with that, you can look at, you know, what are your passions and your values and your beliefs. And then from there, finding out, you know, what are your goals and what are your actions to accomplish those goals. And especially for current applicants, I think you're going to be showing your brand through your personal statement. And so Corey kind of touched on it earlier. If you mentioned that you're super outgoing and, you know, really, really positive person, and then you go into the interview and you're not, I think that kind of goes against what you're saying your brand is. So when you're applying for these fellowships, definitely use your personal statement as a way to show what your passions are and what your values and beliefs are, and how you can use that to help shape the organization you're applying for. Because you'll definitely be expressing your brand through that personal statement.
Thank you, Sierra. Athena, what do you think about how important it is to build a personal brand and how to go about it?
For me, I think having a brand is it's something, but wouldn't say it's everything about the person. I mean, I think sometimes we can get caught up in the things we see on LinkedIn, hearing things that other people do as well. And I think it's sometimes hard to remember, like, you know, everything you see is not necessarily everything that is the person itself. I think it is important to be proud of the work that you're doing, confident in being able to explain, you know, why you've done the things you've done. But I will say, I mean, brand isn't necessarily everything. It's what you do and how you treat the people that you're working with that can really have more of an impact than your own brand.
I love what you just said, because the world of healthcare administration is a small world and everyone really knows each other. Wonderful.
They sure do.
Yes, Louise, what do you think? How to go about building one's brand?
Oh, I think Corey and Athena had wonderful answers. I mean, Sierra and Athena had wonderful answers. I don't know that I have anything more to add. Maybe just, you know, always keeping in mind, how do you want to be perceived as you're going through your fellowship, like your interactions. You know, if you're being asked to do something and that fear or nervousness about, oh, I don't know how to do this, what am I going to do, you know, rears up, but you know, present, yeah, absolutely, I'll give it a try, no problem, you know, and just kind of consistently leave them with the feeling that you're willing to do things and that you are eager to learn, if that's your brand. But, you know, just that's the impression. All your interactions are going to be leaving them with some sort of impression, and they may not necessarily remember the details of whatever it is that you were working on, but they'll remember, like, you were responsible, or you were accountable, and you were eager and willing, and, you know, whatever you want your brand to be. But remember that every interaction leaves an impression.
Wonderful. Thank you, Louise. Corey, and also I want to ask you, so what are your thoughts about it?
I think Athena touched perfectly on, it is so easy to get caught up in what LinkedIn has to say, what people are involved in. It's like, oh, should I be involved in that? Even your co-fellows, right? They're doing certain projects and it's like, oh my gosh, should I be getting some similar experience? But you need to separate yourself and truly come back to why you began this journey in the first place and who you are as a person. Personally, for me, I don't even bring up brands. Couldn't even tell you what my brand is. But I will say I will always show up my true self. I will always be honest and transparent. And I think that's what people want. They just want who you are and your hard work. If you're there to work hard and you're a good person, personable, by all means, why shouldn't you be there?
Thank you, panelists. All right, so before we transition to the Q&A session, one more thing. I just want to ask each panelist, if you could think of just one thing, just kind of word of wisdom, what's important in fellowship process and journey, what would it be? Just one thing, if you choose, would it be? Sierra.
I know this was kind of already said before, but I think that self-awareness and being your authentic self through the interview process is so important because it shows the interviewers that, to see if you actually align with the culture and the people within the organization. So I think it's really important to stay true to yourself throughout the process of applying.
I love that. Thank you. Athena?
I think one thing to remember during the fellowship process is it's not a race, it's a marathon. You really don't want to burn yourself out during this whole process and, lead it to the end of it, be really disappointed or just unhappy with the results that you're getting. I think something to remember is, take your time with it. Think about, why do you want to do a fellowship? I know a lot of people kind of go in thinking, I want to be a director, I want to be a C-suite at the end of my fellowship, but that's not necessarily the purpose of all fellowships. So that's something to remember is, remember your why. Like, why are you in healthcare? Why do you keep working in this field? I think that's something to just keep in your mind when you're getting through this process, because sometimes it's easy to get lost and it's easy to get caught up in everything going on.
Excellent. I love that. Definitely, in anything you do, you really, the first thing is the intent, why. Excellent. Louise?
I think having a willingness to learn, which is what you're really there for, and being able to take feedback in a positive way and grow and develop from that.
Love that. Every manager should be able not only to give feedback, but also accept feedback and learn from it. Corey, what would be your one most important thing?
I think everyone had great points. Last thing is never stop learning. Just because you got the fellowship, you graduated, we still have to learn every day. So be a part of everything and anything, whether it's healthcare related or not. And if you're going to be relocating to your wherever you're doing your fellowship, get involved. I've made some great connections in a local professional org that is not healthcare related. So I think always in your fellowship, especially, you're a sponge. So learn whatever you can, do whatever you can to, learn what's going on outside of healthcare, also within healthcare.
Awesome. Well, this is a fantastic transition to our next part, which is taking questions from the audience. And let me see and scroll in the chat feature. I'm trying to go to the very top.
You should go to the bottom.
Oh,
Start with the, if you're graduating in the fall, when do you start preparing for fellowship applications?
Okay, so I'm going to address it to Sierra because Sierra just recently completed the whole process and she knows most up-to-date information about that. So again, if you are graduating in the fall, when do you start preparing for fellowship applications?
Well, I personally graduated in the spring, but I still think it's around the same timeline. So just starting that summer, most deadlines coming up are, August, September. So I would say start preparing for the applications around May, June, and definitely ask for that letters of rec as early as, 6 to 8 weeks before. Just, if you haven't done that yet, it's okay. But I think it's just always beneficial to get in there as quick as you can when asking for a letter of recommendation, because a lot of professors are going to be getting a lot of people asking all at once. So earlier the better. But I would say, at least 2 months before would be a good time to start writing that application. And, 1 month before is really good to buckle down and get those apps in.
Thank you, Sierra. And the next one, do most fellowship programs only consider recent graduates for less than a year? What if you are more than a year as finished graduate school? Louise, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say you need to really read the guidelines for each organization. I know MD Anderson, the requirement was that you have to be within 1 year of graduation from your graduate program, whether it's MBA or MPH or MHA.
Thank you. All right, Mark, do we have some more questions? I don't see.
We have maybe two others.
Just can't locate them. Could you
See.
please?
Do
maybe-
international students get the opportunity to do administrative fellowships?
Fellows, what do you think? Have you seen international students getting the fellowship opportunities?
I think it depends on your organization. For us, that's obviously a visa. So we unfortunately do not sponsor that for fellows, but every institution is different.
Thank you, Corey. Yeah, I agree. I would check directly with the institution.
And
With
there's
the-
a,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
With
I was
the-
just going to say, with a lot of organizations, they also require for the university to be CAMI accredited. So I know that's also for some fellowships, your education or your master's program had to be CAMI accredited in order to qualify for the fellowship, but not all fellowships require that.
Right.
Ours doesn't, just FYI.
There's also a question, did you all have jobs in healthcare prior to applying? We know that Louise did because she made a point of that, but for the rest of y'all?
Yes, I did have a job. I had several jobs. So funny thing is about me, I'm not really a traditional fellowship candidate. So I worked as, a pharmacy technician. I've done work in public health as well. And then like right before I started applying for fellowships, I was working at Houston Methodist running their COVID-19 clinics and antibody trials. So I had a myriad of different experiences, but I feel like with the fellowship, like you don't have to be a traditional, like I did hospital system jobs or internships before going in. I think that's why I'm very big on selling the point of being able to talk about your experience with, even if it's different from what you would traditionally see.
And that's a good segue to another question about if they have an MPA or, other degrees. I think it's less about the degrees and more about how you can speak to your experience and your goals and your interest and your enthusiasm for a particular, not just a fellowship, but a job also. And then let's see. Here's a question maybe for Louise. Do you believe it's possible to have too much experience to apply for a fellowship? Working in prior roles with various executive leadership, both public and private sector, working in process improvement with projects crossing several, if not all, service lines?
I think you need to ask yourself why you're doing the fellowship. If you feel like there's something that you can gain from it, then no, it's not possible to have too much experience. And I think that is an asset to the organization. But I think one of the things in reflecting on my experience is I came into, and now as I'm searching for a job within the organization, and people are like, whoa, I didn't know you had so much experience. I came in being, very humble, which is kind of my style, because I'm like, I'm there to learn. And I think if I could start over again, I probably wouldn't play it that humble, and I think I might share, hey, here's my background. What are some projects where I could really contribute, to use my strengths as, as an asset to contributing, and start off by getting that guidance, but it also allows you the opportunity to share that you had all this. So I think that was probably my first mistake, because now I'm starting from scratch to explain, yeah, we worked together great on this project. And here's why I did a good job, because I have all this background, things like that. So I don't think you can have too much as long as you keep asking what your reason is for being there.
Fantastic, great insight, thank you. All right, well, it looks like our time together is coming to the end, and I would like to thank again so much our wonderful panelists for your precious time and sharing your experience. I'm sure it's greatly appreciated by the audience. We had lots of questions. And for the audience, I also would like to remind that next week there is a part 2 of this webinar with 3 more fellows. So be sure to join us and participate in our continuing discussion.
Thank you all.
Well, thank you so much again, everyone, and good luck to you all, fellows. Through this experience, I'm glad to be connected with you on LinkedIn. So I look forward to watching your continuing success.